Hello and welcome on in, everybody. I'm your host, Sam Peterson, and we're going to be doing today's Photoshop challenge, which is going to be an underwater effect. If you want to get the starter file that has the resources for this particular challenge, check the description below, and that should have a link for you. So let me show you what we're going to be creating today. We're going to be using this image. You can use any image you want, but this is kind of the effect that we're going to be creating. Sort of this like half underwater effect. And yeah, let's jump right into that. So first what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my lion image here and I'm going to mask out the background so we can put whatever we want. Now you can get creative with this. You can use really any image that you want to submerge in water. This will work. But this is the image we're going to use today. So I'm going to go into a selection tool like the quick selection tool. And from here, what I can do is I can click on select subject, and that's going to use Photoshop's AI to do the bulk of the work for me, which is always great. And then from here, what I want to do is refine the selection a little bit. So I'm going to go to select and mask. And then you can kind of see this edge and how it's masked off here. Now there's this button at the top called refine hair. I'm going to click that, and you can kind of see that does a pretty good job of cleaning up the hair automatically for us. So another AI driven tool that, pushes it even further. Now from here, if I want to clean it up manually, I can go to my refine edge selection brush, or sorry, my refine edge brush tool over on the left here, second from the top. And I can just click this around the outside and drag it down just along the body too, where it's kind of out of focus, and we'll see how that does. Now that looks good. I like that. So I'm going to click OK to accept that, and I'm going to click mask. Now from here, you can't see it because my head's blocking it, but there's a little bit that was masked out here that I didn't catch. Now, after the fact, you can always change that. So we can select our mask, the black and white part, and we can paint in, let me select my brush tool. We can paint in black to conceal or white to reveal. So I'm going to be painting in with white to reveal what was hidden. And we got our little selection going. So I think that's pretty good. Next, I want to add in a background. We're going to have like a placeholder background for this image. I picture this lion being in the jungle. I picture him like in a little pond in the jungle. So I found this image that works really well for that. So I'm going to go ahead and do Controller Command A, Controller Command C to copy. Controller Command A is to select all, and then Controller Command C to copy. Go back into our document, Controller Command V to paste. And now you can see this image if I press V, which is our move tool up here at the top left. This is a really big image compared to our lion image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click that background image, do convert to smart object, and that's going to allow us to scale this down without losing resolution. Normally, if you scale an image down, then you scale it back up, you're going to lose some information. It's going to look kind of pixelated, but this protects us from that because I don't actually know what size I want this yet. I'm going to click and drag this below our lion layer. And maybe I should name these lion background just to keep it organized because we're going to get a lot of layers in this. So I'm going to scale this around to what I think it might look good at. I think somewhere around here looks pretty good. Again, we can always adjust that later. So from here, I want to add a blur to it. I know the background's going to be kind of out of focus. I can go to Filter, Blur, and then Gaussian Blur. And since it's a smart object, we can also adjust this blur later on. I have it at 8 pixels. I think that actually works pretty well. But we have a smart filter here now, and we can always go back, adjust the size of the background, and adjust the blur. So that gives us a lot of flexibility. So next, what I want to do is put some water layers on this image. And this effect is largely made up of 3 layers. It's going to be the top surface of the water, the seam in between, and the water down below that's darker. So I have this image here, which is a water seam. And since the background's white for this, I can actually click and hold on my quick selection tool to grab my magic wand tool. I don't know if you guys use the magic wand tool a lot, but I actually find quite a bit of use of it. So I'm going to click the white background, and it's really good for solid colors. So I'm going to click the background, and I'm going to make sure contiguous is on, because if contiguous at the top is checked off and you select, you'll see it's selecting the white of the bubbles too. When contiguous is checked on, it only selects that color that's connected. So from here, I might do something like I can modify my selection by going to Select, modify, and I might expand my selection a little bit to get rid of some of that white seam that it seems to be selecting. I can also go to select, modify, and feather it. Maybe 4 pixels just to make it a softer edge so it's not unnaturally hard. Now for our particular purposes, this won't matter, but I use these a lot to refine my selections. So I'm going to do Controller Command Shift I, which inverts the selection, and then just do Controller Command C again, go back to my document, Controller Command V. Now you could totally bring this image in untouched and mask it within here. It's really up to you. It's really up to personal preference. But we have this now. I'm going to right click it, do Convert to Smart Object again so we can scale it around. And I'm going to bring this above my lion. I'll actually name this Water Seam as well, just to keep organized, because again, once you have too many layers, it gets kind of chaotic. So I like to keep that organized from the get-go. Now we're only going to be using the seam, so I'm scaling this just to fit the width of it. If it happens to be up here, if you want the seam to be higher up, like past his nose, don't worry about this because we're just using the seam. We're going to mask this bottom out anyway. So for me, I think maybe having the seam right there could look good. But what I want to do is actually warp this because the seam's a little too wavy. I kind of want to level it out a bit. So I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and Warp. I actually have that hotkey because I warp things all the time. You can see my hotkey is labeled right there. You can always customize your hotkeys. I'm going to click Warp. I'm going to bring this part down a lot. It's splashing up too high. You can tell this is a much smaller, like more zoomed in image. So I gotta modify it a little bit for it to look right for this particular image. That looks pretty good. I'm gonna click Enter there. And now I think that's where I want it. So I think the next thing I need to do here to really tell is to mask this. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna click at the bottom of my layer panel, this Add to Layer Mask, this little rectangle. And then we can click the mask, the little white part, make sure you have that. And again, we can paint with black to conceal, white to reveal. 99% of the time when I'm masking, I'm using a large, soft, round brush to get these gradual transitions. So you can leave some of these bubbles if you want. You can kind of, just paint right up to the seam if you want. I'll leave a little bit of the bubbles, but paint mostly to the seam there. And then on top, the same thing. I can adjust the brush size with the bracket keys, or you can go up here to adjust the size. And then just paint out the top as well, because again, we just want the seam. And we don't need to think about where it's landing on the lion's face because we're going to have a top surface level of water to really indicate the height of the water. Now that looks pretty good. Now say I want to adjust the seam a little bit more in terms of warping. You'll see if I try to warp it here, I get an error that says, a warp transformation has been applied to the smart object, but warp transforms are not allowed for linked layer masks. So basically, if I want to warp it any further, I just got to go to my layers panel and click this little link between them. And then I can warp it further. Oh, whoops. Make sure you have the layer selected and not the mask. I can select my warp again, which is Edit, Transform, Warp. I can adjust it and click Enter. You may have to adjust your mask once you do that because the mask will stay in place. But I think that's pretty good. So I'll leave that as is. And we'll go into our next layer. So this is the top surface of the water is what we want to do next. So I believe that is this image. So I found a nice kind of water surface image. I played around with a few, but I thought this one worked pretty well. I don't want the boat in it. And I think this section of it will be fine. So I'm using the elliptical marquee tool over here on the left, which is M for the hotkey. And I'm just going to select the part I want. Again, you could bring this whole thing in and mask it exactly, but I know what I want, so I'm just going to grab it. Controller Command C, bring it in here. Controller Command V to paste it. And again, if I zoom out, press V for my move tool, you can see this is a really large image. So I'm going to right click it, convert to smart object like we've been doing for every layer, and then scale this down a little bit. I can kind of determine what part of the water I want to select. I'm going to use the end part because the waves are a little bit smaller. It looks a little bit more calm. So I'm going to click OK here, or I'm going to press Enter to confirm that. So from here, I'm going to mask this as well. Little hotkey down here, the rectangle at the bottom of the layers panel. Mask it, make sure I have my mask selected. Press B for my brush tool. and just, paint out the part that I want, mask out the part that I want. Now, one thing I can do to kind of help me out is I can actually go to my mask of my lion, since we do have a mask around the whole lion, right click that, do add mask to selection, and go over to my water seam, select my mask for it, and I can paint here to paint out the area around the lion's face while still keeping it back here. So I can kind of determine where I want the seam of the water to be. I might bring it up just a touch here if I want it kind of landing right there. And I'm using this soft brush, so it's kind of a soft transition. And I think that looks pretty good. So I'm going to do Control D to deselect. I'm going to put this below my water seam because currently it's kind of visually confusing. And then I think I'm going to mask out a little bit towards the top here. One, because it's going to give us a softer edge that way. Got to make sure I press select black to conceal. One, because it's going to give us a softer seam. Two, I want to dial in exactly where I want this to be. And then, of course, below the seam, we don't want any of this, so I'm just going to paint all this out again with a soft round brush. Using a big enough brush size that I get a nice gradual transition that doesn't leave a hard seam anywhere. So you can kind of see where our effect's going from here, and we have masks for all these so we can adjust them later. Now, you can put these wherever you want. You may be thinking, well, he can't breathe if his nose is below water, but maybe he just dunked his head in for a second or something like that. I might do that a little bit more here. There we go. All right, so where are we at? I got the selection here, or I got the mask dialed in, and I think that's pretty good. The next step is going to be a lot of adjustments, but I think this is a good time to say hey to everyone. What's up, Bruce? Good to see everyone. It's always great to see you guys popping in. A lot of the same faces. Norish, we got Steve, Frank. Also, I'm curious, can you guys hear a bunch of noise outside? Because as soon as I'm about to go live, they're unloading construction equipment outside. Now there's lawnmowers going off. It's very loud for me, but I do have some AI stuff that hopefully is keeping it quiet. But anyway, I just want to remind you guys to join the Discord community. If you want to share your entries and everything, we got a bunch of mentors there. I'm a mentor myself. And I want to give you guys a little reminder that next week on Friday is going to be a review stream. So basically, we're just going to be covering whatever you guys want. If you want me to clarify something, go more in depth, anything like that, let me know. If you have questions that you want to remember, maybe shoot me a Discord message or anything like that. But anyway, the next step for this is going to be kind of merging these layers together a little bit. So what I want to do is actually add like an underwater layer. Now you can do that with a multiply layer, which I'll show you, but you can also do it if you have an image like this. So I'm going to do Controller Command A, Controller Command C, and then we're going to go back to this document here. Let's see. So what I want to do is I want to post this with Controller Command V. I want to maybe make it a smart object again, right click, smart object, scale it down just because it is so large. And from here, I can I'm going to leave the top part of the water where the light's peeking through. I'm going to mask that out. So I kind of want to position this. I'm actually going to grab it, hold shift so I can kind of transform it without keeping the proportions, like where I want those light rays. That looks pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and mask out the top of this. So I'm going to create a mask down here at the bottom of the layers panel. Click that little icon. Select black. You can tell it's a lot of masking. That's really a lot of what compositing is. I was going to say this particular technique, but compositing in general, there's a lot of masking and adjusting, essentially. That's kind of the name of the game for today's challenge. A lot of practice masking, a lot of practice color correcting. So from here, I'm going to try a different blending mode. You can cycle through the blending modes and see how they look. But I found that hard light works pretty decent for this one. Now, it's way too saturated. It looks really intense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and I'm going to do a Hue and Saturation Adjustment Layer. I'm going to right-click that Hue and Saturation Adjustment Layer, clip it to my underwater, and I'm actually going to name this layer underwater, just so I know. And from here, I'm going to crank down the saturation. It actually starts to look pretty good with less saturation, maybe like minus 75 or something like that. It still keeps a bit of the blue. Still, let me go to minus 100. You can see the difference there. Still keeps a bit of the blue tint, which I do like. So I'll leave it like there. All right. You can also add a multiply layer. I want to show that really quick. So if I create a multiply layer, you can get a very, whoops. Oh, no, we're good. Let me turn my hue and saturation back on. I'll take the multiply layer below the underwater layer, and you can see how this will give us a similar effect. I hid the underwater layer, and if I do some sort of color like this, I can try some sort of bluish, greenish. You can play around with the hue. You can see where my color is. It's kind of a desaturated, a little bit above mid-tone. I may want like a bit of a green tint, so I can go with that. And from here, you can just mask it out. So I can grab with my elliptical marquee tool over here on the left, hotkey M, and I can just press mask. And you can get a similar effect there. So if I put my underwater layer back on, you can see it's way too dark now because of the multiply layer, but I'll tweak the opacity of the multiply layer down quite a bit, and we'll use that just as a backup, just in case I want to edit anything or tweak the coloration or anything like that. Might make it a little bit more green, a little bit more saturated. Could even lower the opacity of the hard light underwater layer. You know, you can kind of mix and match. So I think that looks pretty good. We have our sort of underwater effect now. The only thing that really doesn't look right is the colors of the water seam and the background don't match. Like this looks like ocean water and we're in this kind of green jungle setting. So I think we need to do something about that. So from here, what I want to do is find my water surface layer, which I didn't name. Shame on me. Water surface. Let's name that now so I can find it easily. And I'm just going to go to layer, adjustment layer, hue and saturation. I use hue and saturation a lot. I don't know if you guys all have kind of favorite adjustment layers, but this is one I use like every day. So from here, I'm going to just tweak this down a bit, desaturate it, I should say, and maybe make it more green. You can see when we tweak it to the left here, we get more green tones. When we push it to the right, we get more purple. This setting definitely feels more turquoise and green, so I'm going to kind of match it to that water seam that we have. Could even go a little bit greener, but I had to crank down the saturation a bit too to make that feel right. I think right about there looks good. It's an adjustment layer, so we can always go back and mask it away if we want. I think that looks pretty good. The water seam, it's kind of bugging me too, so let's throw an adjustment layer on there. Maybe a little bit less saturated, a little bit more green. And make sure to clip those to the layers they're intended for. Otherwise, it's going to be affecting everything. So I think that looks pretty decent. Now the lion head does seem a bit warm, a bit saturated. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to do a new adjustment layer, hue and saturation again. And we're going to clip that to the lion layer. Make sure it's right above the lion layer, right click it, create clipping mask, and clip it there. I just want to desaturate it a bit, maybe add a little bit more like green tone. So I'm putting the hue up just a couple, and then the saturation down just a few, just so it doesn't look kind of unnaturally warm in this environment. And this is all just color correcting. You know, this is just trying to make all those layers that we masked and put into place, make them fit each other a little bit better. So I'm actually going to take off that multiply layer. I think it's fine without it. From here, what I want to do, let me see. Where are we at? I think the next thing I want to do is give the line a little bit of lighting here. So what I'm going to do on top of this hue and saturation layers, I'm actually going to make a new adjustment layer, but for levels. And I'm going to right click that levels adjustment layer, clip it to the lion. And what I want to do here is I just want to darken down the lion. Now we have this bottom slider that basically negates how bright it can be or how dark it can be. So all this white that's to the right of our slider is being cut out by this. So I want to go down to maybe something pretty dark. We're going for a shadow effect here. I may take it down even darker, like 145 looks pretty good. And what I want to do is I want to mask this out to create a lighting effect. He just looks a little too evenly lit in this scene, doesn't quite work for me. So what I want to do is I want to go to my layer mask here that I created and choose black. You know, black conceals the effect that we did. And just paint with a soft round brush to kind of brighten them up a bit and keep the rest of them in shadow. I think that looks pretty good. A couple more things I might want to do. Let's see here. I wonder if I want to brighten this up a bit. So I'm going to use the adjustment layer for the underwater effect, the hard light layer that we did. I'm actually going to brighten it up a bit. I think that looks pretty good, rather than have the brightness where it was. Let's see if we got time for this. You can kind of add as much as you want to this. Go as crazy as you want. But what I'd like to do is add in another image just to give it a little character. Now I have this cool image. And I like this mossy bottom, and I think it would fit nicely with this image, with our design. So I'm going to click my quick selection tool here, and then I'm just going to grab this kind of mossy bottom that I think looks pretty neat. Now you could even go into like select mask, maybe do the refine edge brush tool if you want a more natural edge. See how that works. I think that looks pretty good. So I'll select OK. I can mask that out. I can even do like apply layer mask, grab that, Control A, Control C, Controller Command A, Controller Command C, and just bring it into my image. A lot of times I just copy and paste a lot of stuff. I'm going to put it on top of the lion image right here, but underneath the rest of it. So right click that, convert to smart object, and then pull this in to scale it with the move tool, hit enter, kind of put that in place. All right, I think that's looking pretty good. Let's see here. All right, so we're running out of time. We're getting low on time. But the last thing I really want to do, again, a lot of this is just cleaning things up, adjusting them, really tweaking them to be how you want in terms of masking and color correction. But one thing that I think is pretty neat for this is this doesn't quite look underwater to me as much as it could. Now this mossy layer is under the other effects. It's being affected by the hard light layer here, so it's getting that blue tint. But one thing I kind of like to do towards the end of my designs, and I would tweak this a little bit more normally, is I can merge everything together with Controller Command, Alter Option, Shift E, which basically screen caps everything that's visible into one layer, merges it all into a new layer. And I can do Convert to Smart Object, right click it. I can go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and essentially we can make a little kind of like blurred underwater look, because water's not going to be crystal clear. It's not going to be completely crisp. I did like a 6 pixel blur there. I think that looks pretty good. We can always tweak it. Maybe 5 looks a little better, 5, 6, somewhere like that. Click OK. And then I can always mask out this filter. So we have the Gaussian blur. You can see the smart filter mask. And I can paint with black on top of that smart filter mask to not affect anything except what's underwater. So we get a little bit of that. You can kind of see that difference, and I think it looks a little bit more realistic. Maybe I went too hard on the blur. Maybe 5 would look a little bit better, but I could always go in and tweak that. Put it at 5, click OK. Smart filters are great for that purpose. And I think that's about it. From here on out, usually what I would do is I'd go up to new adjustment layer. I would maybe do like a levels boost if I want to boost the brightness a bit. This is just on top of everything. Maybe I would go to color balance and try to push the greens of this image a little bit more. You can see that if I push that to that side, this towards green, and kind of get some cool effects here. Warm up everything together, make it all fit. But that is it for me, guys. I'm out of time. Make sure you join the Discord here. Also, I'm glad to hear you guys can't hear all that noise because it's crazy. So thanks for letting me know. If you go to the Discord, you can see all the entries. People have been doing awesome designs. I've really been enjoying seeing all these. Great work, everybody. We have mentors giving feedback, myself, Valdair, Ted. We have a lot of great community members giving feedback and getting feedback and, kind of exchanging and sharing work with each other. So if you haven't checked out the Discord, definitely do so. We also have a description below that should have all the links and resources you guys will need for this. And yeah, appreciate you guys being here. Hopefully that was helpful. Of course, let me know in the Discord if you have any questions for this technique, but I thought this was kind of a fun one. So I will see you guys next time. Have a good one, everybody.